I'm Lauren from Red Thread Studio. We are a sewing and dressmaking company based in Edinburgh, Scotland. We opened in 2013 and over the past few years we've been teaching thousands of people how to sew. Today we'll be working on making scrubs. We'll be concentrating on the more complicated aspects of sewing scrubs, for example, necklines, side vents and inseam pockets. So let's get started. So our first tutorial is going to be sewing necklines. So what we've got is our V neckline front facing and we've got our back facing. I have pressed on fusible interfacing onto the back of my fabric. I just used a dry iron on quite a high heat with a bit of cloth or tea towel over the top of the interfacing, just to make sure that the interfacing doesn't melt when you press it with your iron. Remember that the bumpy or the rough side, that's the side that's got the glue on it, that needs to go face down on top of the wrong side of your fabric whenever you're pressing. Okay, what else you'll need is you'll need your sewing machine and a pair of scissors. You need a ruler, a pencil, some dressmaking chalk, and your front and your back of your top. You want to sew those seams, the shoulder seams, along the top, and you want to finish off the top of those seams with either an overlocker or a zigzag on a regular machine. For the purpose of this video, I will be using a regular sewing machine to sew the zigzags on the edges, to finish off the edges. And just for those of you who don't have an overlocker at home, you can use a zigzag on a normal sewing machine. Some of the sewing machines also have a mock stitch, which can give you like the illusion of an overlocker. It does take a lot longer and it uses a lot more thread, but if you've got the time to do that, that's fantastic. So what we'll be doing now is we'll start off by stitching our neckline of our facing pieces together. Okay, so I'll just move this over so you can have a look. Right, so I've got my front of my facing up and the back of my facing down, so right sides together. I'm matching up my straight edges along the tops, and then I'm going to start by pinning these edges together. So I've got one pin in there and one pin in here. There we go. Great. So the next thing we want to do is we want to sew our straight stitch all the way along here with whatever seam allowance your pattern requires you to. Some patterns use a 1 centimeter seam allowance, some use a 1.5, whichever they are asking for, that's what we're going to do. Put your raw edge against your seam allowance measurements on your machine, and then we're going to start sewing. Just increasing my stitch size to a 3. That's what I tend to use for cotton and polycotton straight stitching. Okay, so we're doing our back stitching and then we're going to stitch all the way along to the edge of the facing and finish off with a back stitch. Okay, great. So there you have your straight stitch, and I'd like you to just do the other side. Okay. Alright, so once we've done that, we want to press open these seams. So press them open like that, and then we're going to zigzag all the way along the outer edge of your facing, just to stop the edge from fraying when it's on the inside of the garment. For the purpose of these videos, I'm using Red Thread, which is obviously our brand name, but it's also quite good for you to be able to see what I'm sewing, so hopefully it stands out in the videos. I've now pressed my facing seams open, and I'm going to start to zigzag the edge of my outer facing. Basically we want to zigzag all the way along the edge and we want the needle just to hit the edge of the fabric so that most of the zigzag is on the edge of the fabric. That will neaten it off nicely. And in terms of settings, for my zigzag I'm using quite a wide width of stitch. I'm using a number 5 width, and I'm also using quite a small length of stitch, so I'm using a number 2 length. We want to create quite a tight zigzag for sewing scrubs. The scrubs are going to get a lot of use. They're going to be washed many times, so we want to create a nice finish that's not going to unravel. So just start sewing. Go all the way around the edges. And once you've finished off your edges, you can lay your facing pieces on the table facing up, with the right side facing up, and then we're going to take our top and put it inside out down on the table. Okay. Alright, so we've got the right sides together, and we're going to start matching up the different parts of the neckline. So I'm going to get my side seam together. Okay, so we've got the side seam of the top matching up with the side seam of, or the seam of your facing, and we're going to pin those edges together like that. Okay, and then we're going to get the other shoulder seam and pin that with the seam of the facing. Alright, making sure to pin it so that you've got the facing open. Like that. Okay, and then we're going to take the middle of the back, the center back, and we're going to pin those sections together, so the middle of the facing to the middle of the back of the top, like that. I don't know if anyone can see there. And then we're going to pin the middle of the neckline together as well. So that's the neckline there, those two points pinning together. There we go. Okay, then we're going to continue pinning in between those pins, just putting in 1 or 2 pins in between. Okay, it's really important to pin this section here because it does move quite a bit when you're sewing, so we want to make sure that it's nice and secure for sewing. Okay, there we go. And now we're just going to check that we've pinned everything right. So you've got the top inside out, so with the wrong side facing up, and you've got the neckline or the facing with the right side facing up. And if you turn it like this, you should see the interfacing showing on the inside. Okay, so you've got right sides together. Okay, before we start sewing, we're going to draw our nice V neckline. Everyone's so excited about the V, oh! But it is good practice. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark my seam allowance. If it's 1.5 or 1, you basically just want to mark it from the edge of your neckline into the middle, into the fabric. I'm going to mark off about 3 different places from this edge, and then I'm going to go along the other side and do the same. Okay, I'm actually just going to take out that pin for now because I also want to draw down the front of the V, draw a straight line over here so that I can get my middle point. Now I'm going to take my pencil and I'm going to join up all those dots together, drawing through that middle line that I've just drawn over there, and then I'm going to do that on the other side as well. Okay, and then you should have your intersection point over here, and then as you get to your point you'll be able to have a nice sharp V over here. Okay, I find if you don't draw it and you just eyeball it, it does tend to go either to the left or the right, so it's quite good to get a nice sharp V when you're stitching, to have that drawn out. And I'm just going to put the pin back in there. I find it easier to actually take the arm off my machine when I'm doing circular sewing, so it just helps you to be able to sew without things getting all tangled and puckered. Okay, I'm going to start sewing the middle of the back edge first. I find it just makes it a little bit neater, so you don't have any back stitching or anything anywhere near the V. Okay. Check you've put your machine on a straight stitch. Okay, and let's go. I'm going to go all the way along the edge. Okay, and you can see as I'm going along, I'm pulling my fabric forward just to ease it all through. Stop it from bunching up on the one side. You want to make sure that it's as flat as possible. I'm using my left hand here and my right hand underneath the fabric, my left hand on top, just to make sure that all the layers are nice and flat and that nothing is folding underneath or on top. Making sure my seams are open underneath of my facing. Okay, it's a bit tricky as you get to the shoulder section here, so I'm just going to take it nice and slow all the way around. Okay, and as we get to this middle V section, I'm just going to go a bit slowly. That wasn't slow, was it? Go slowly. I'm going to start stitching on my line that I've drawn. Okay. Working towards that V. Now, if you want to slow down a lot when you get to the V, you can manually turn the wheel. With your right hand, that helps. It just gives you a lot more control as you get to that V section. Make sure you've got your fabric, your needle in your fabric whenever you get to that V, that point there, so that whenever you lift up your presser foot, you don't lose your place, and then you can pivot easily, like that. Okay. All right. Got everything in position, and now I'm going to do just a few manual stitches just to get myself away from that point, so I know I'm sewing exactly in the right place, and then I can continue sewing upwards towards the shoulder line. Okay, so we're just going to carry on sewing all the way around and meet up at the back with a back stitch. So we've sewn all the way around our neckline and we've finished at the back with a back stitch. Okay, the next thing we want to do is we want to look inside the facing and check that we don't have any puckers. Sometimes as we're sewing along, the one side creates a bit of a fold underneath, and then you'll find that you've got a pucker in your seam. So we're just going to have a look and see if we've got any puckers in our seam. Sometimes if it's a tiny pucker, you can ease it out by just using your nail and pulling the fabric like that, and you could ease out the pucker. If it's quite a large pucker, then you might need to unpick a section of your stitching and smooth out the fabric, put it back under the machine, and pull it quite taut to stitch the section together again. Okay, so once you've checked for puckers, you'll see the pucker in the seam over here. That's where we're looking all the way around. We want to, after we've done that, we want to turn it back in and start trimming that seam down to reduce the bulk. There's lots of different methods of doing this. A lot of people will snip every centimetre or so around the edge. I tend to trim my seams right down, basically just taking them down by 1/2 centimetre, and I find that works really well too, reducing the bulk. Basically just trimming it all down to 1/2 centimetre all the way around the edge, like that. Okay. What I forgot to mention is actually we want to reinforce our V-neck, the V edge, the point over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop it back in the machine. I'm going to show you what to do here. Okay, so I would say maybe about 5 or 6 stitches above your point of your V, you'd like to just do a row of stitching on top of what you've already done. So I'm just going to do a little back stitch, and then I'm going to go forward, manually turning my wheel to get to that point. Oops. And then pivoting and going back up again. It's just, we're going to be cutting quite close to the V, so I want to make sure that my V neck is not going to unravel, that sharp point won't unravel, and that these stitches are nice and secure. There we go. So I've just reinforced that V with some more stitches over there. Okay. So I'm going to continue trimming off my seam. All the way around. I'll stop at the V, and then I'm going to trim around this edge over here and then stop at the V there. Okay, and once you've done that, you want to take your scissors and you want to snip right into that V like that. Okay, about 1 millimeter away from your stitching. Don't be too scared to cut too close. You do want a nice sharp point there, and you have reinforced that seam with more stitching, so that will be nice and strong. Just make sure you don't cut the stitching. So once we've done that, all the trimming, we're going to turn the facing to the outside like that, and then we're going to ease out the seam here, and we're going to press it nice and flat all the way along with the iron. Okay, if you want to, you can press your facing a little bit further back so that you see the front of your top showing over here, and that means that whenever it's turned in out to the right way around, you don't actually see your facing sticking out at all. You've got most of your facing on the inside. Once you have pressed your neckline on the inside, you can turn it the right way around and then take your iron and give it a nice good press along the V here. That gives you a nice sharp edge over there. You'll see that your bulk has been reduced on your shoulder edge over here because you've trimmed it right down, and it's nice and sharp and flat, and you'll have a nice, hopefully a nice sharp V over there in the middle. Now we're going to start doing our top stitching. The purpose of the top stitching is to make sure that this facing doesn't roll out to the outside whenever it's been washed and put on again. It keeps it nice and secure on the inside. If you find that you've kind of lost your fold line of your top, you can always match up the shoulders over here like that, and then find the center of your top in the front over here, and then find the folded edge, you can see, at the bottom of your fabric, and then pull it out over here, and then you can use your fingers to create a nice crisp fold line in the V section over here, so that whenever you open it up you can see where that line should be. Okay, especially if you've been doing a lot of pressing of your V, you will struggle to see that center line. Okay, after that we're going to take some chalk and a ruler, and we're going to measure, just like we did with the inside of the V, we're going to measure our line for our top stitching. So I'm going to do mine at 3 centimeters. Okay, whatever your pattern asks you to sew. Okay, a lot of sewing machines don't actually have large measurement markings on the metal plates. So for example, with my machine, mine only goes up to a 2 centimeter marking. So I have made my own 3 centimeter marking with a bit of paper over here. That's my 3 centimeter, and that will help me to sew my 3 centimeter line all the way along the edge by matching up this edge with that 3 centimeter marking. Okay, so I'm gonna just use that fold line as a gauge to draw my chalk middle section, and then I'm going to match up all those dots that I've been drawing, my V, and match them up on the other side. There we go, and then I've got my intersection point over there for the bottom of my V. Okay, the next thing you want to do is you want to take some pins, and you want to put your pins all the way along the edge. I tend to put my pins with the ball of the pin on the outside perpendicular to my edge, because I find it really helps when I'm sewing. I can literally just either sew over the pin, or I can pull it out as I go along quite easily. So it's really good to pin when you're stitching this section, because you want to keep your fabric nice and flat, and pins definitely do help with that. There we go. Just put one more in. Okay, all ready. So once again, like we did with the previous stitching, we're going to start at the middle of the back. And I'm going to measure up my edge with my 3 centimeters along there. And we're going to stitch all the way around the edge. I'd recommend using a thread that's very similar to the colour of your fabric if you can get hold of it. It just means that if you've got any wobbles, it won't look as obvious as red thread would. Okay. I'm going to stitch all the way around. There's definitely no rushing with this one, just take it nice and slow, because you'll see it, so no pressure. You'll see that I'm using my left hand to smooth out my fabric over here on the left, and I'm using my right hand to help ease it along the back. Also pulling it through again like I did before in the front. Taking it nice and slow around this curve, making sure all the layers are nice and flat. One very helpful tip, I must say, is before you start doing any kinds of top stitching, I would just make sure that your bobbin is nice and full. There's nothing worse than almost finishing a beautiful row of top stitching to find out that your bobbin is just run out, and then you've got half of your top stitching done and half of it to go still. So it's really helpful to be able to sew continuously in this section. I'm just getting to my V now, so I'm just pulling out that fabric that's been gathering underneath, flattening it underneath. There we go, making sure that's all nice and flat. And I've got the help of my chalk now, and you stitch on top of that chalk towards your V section over here. There we go, I've hit my point. I'm going to lift up my presser foot and I'm going to swivel everything around. And put the presser foot down and then go back up the V, all the way around to the back edge. Okay, then you can finish off with a back stitch and then take your everything out and trim off your threads. There we go, and there you have your neckline, nice and finished. Thanks for joining us at Red Thread Studio. If you've got any questions or if you'd like to see any other YouTube tutorials, please give us a shout. Hope you have a wonderful day. Happy sewing.